Proof is what you can show. Cultural proof is who and what makes that proof actually matter. And distribution is the multiplier that decides whether the market actually sees it. Most aesthetic leaders have at least one of these, but very few have all three working together. And that gap between the proof you have and the authority that you're actually accruing is almost always a distribution problem. It's not a results problem. And you have done the work, obviously. And the question is whether the right people know it in the right context through the right channels. That is what this episode is about. I want to name something that is almost universal among the leaders I talk to at the executive level in this industry. And it's that the strongest proof often stays private. You see the results, obviously. You see the business growing. You see, if it's a publicly traded company, you see the returns and those gains. So something's actually obviously working. But many times, what you don't see is from the individual, their judgment, their thinking, their own personal asset owned, right? And that is a really important thing. The transformation on a practice level that changed a patient's life is in a chart that no one sees. And the partnership that validated their approach is known inside a few rooms and nothing else. And the outcome this should be anchoring to is their authority. And it's something that they mention once, maybe on an interview or in a private conversation, and then they never mention it again. Private proof does not compound. It is not modesty that keeps things private. Usually it is the media architecture. And leaders who have not been taught to think about proof as a strategic asset default to humility or privacy or the assumption that the work speaks for itself. And for many people that's all it's going to be, and that's fine. But the people who own their personal brand asset, they're going to think about that differently, or even their practice asset. And this work doesn't speak for itself. You need to build it a microphone. And let me walk you through 3 layers, okay? The layer 1 is demonstrated results. This is the evidence that you can do what you say. And again, we've talked about that. That's going to be your client transformations, your business growth, the patient experience, team development, a body of published work, a platform partnership, a stage appearance. These are not just proof objects. These are things that can be pointed to. And the question is not whether you have them. You have a lot of them. The question is whether they are visible, organized, and legible to the people that you're trying to reach. Layer 2 is cultural proof. And this is the demonstrated result. This is not what you have done. It is who and what has actually validated it. And what rooms have you been invited to? What institutions have actually sought you out? What peers, leaders, publications, or communities have said through invitation, citation, partnership, or endorsement that your work matters. So Capfer, I want to share this with you. He said prestige is partly given by key clients. Their aura and reputation transfer to the brand. And I think that's really important to think about. Cultural proof works the same way. When the right room chooses you, some of that room's meaning transfers to you. Another work that I like to reference is Persuasion by Cialdini. And he does talk about referent power. And referent power, it literally says what it means. Your association does influence how people think about you on an industry level, on a personal level, all of it, right? And when you're in the right rooms, what happens is that you do not have to explain who you are in the next room. And that association has already done it. And I think that's really powerful. I even know when I had started out in medical aesthetics, in 2019, I was completely into the financial planning world. That was my thing. And, we had started Diamond Hands Media in 2020, a little bit after that. But I do know that I did not have a place in the rooms. And I said, let me build my own room. So I started with my own body of work. I started with the Diamond Hands podcast. And I said, let me build my network of people. I don't need them for anything right now. They don't need me for anything right now. We don't know each other, but I want to understand. I want to learn. And by doing that, I got invited into a room. And then when the next room or the next conference reached out to, they wanted me to speak, I didn't really have to explain myself as much for the first one. And that changed for the third and the fourth. Same thing with clients. Film one conference, you film another conference, and then it keeps going. Same with institutions, same with practices. And that is really important to build for your own body of work. When you speak for someone, don't even think about the speaking fee, but it's a cultural proof object, okay? And this is why a client relationship with a significant patient, for example, for you, is not just revenue, it's a signal if you're able to actually use it strategically with permission, of course. And then layer three. So, first of all, we said layer one is demonstrated results. Number two is cultural proof. Number three is actually distribution. And distribution really is that multiplier, okay? And this is where the luxury thinking becomes a real discipline for leadership brands. Most people think of distribution as reach. How many people are actually seeing this? Bigger is better, more is better. However, luxury strategy actually says the opposite. The goal is not to be everywhere. The goal is to be unmistakable in the right rooms. And without distribution, remember that your proof stays private. So think about your distribution network, right? And with the wrong distribution, if you associate with the wrong people or depend on the wrong people to distribute your proof, that's actually going to cheapen your brand. And again, with the right distribution, proof creates what is called by CAP for selective desire. And that is what makes authority feel scarce, because scarcity is what makes the right people want access. And this is why there are some practices that have a wait list for, 1, 2, 3 months. People who have a wait list of over a year, I think that's not good. That's another problem altogether. But why they have consistent wait lists because of that. And so let me give you an image I often come back to in, this work. So think about a leader that you respect. And we all know leaders that we respect in the medical aesthetics industry. Someone in your field whose authority feels unquestionable. Someone who, when their name comes up in a conversation, the room already knows what they stand for. And maybe that's you. What makes that person feel like that is almost never one thing. It is not the follower account. It is not the viral post. It is not even the stage. It's the accumulation. What you are not taking into consideration is the trust compression and the trust stacking that they have been doing year in and year out. And, those results are what keep being referenced, whether it's an energy that someone has. And whenever they go on stage and how they teach, people just love that. The way that they show up online, the same type of energy, people just love that. So it kind of starts to compound, right? But these rooms that keep inviting them back, the consistent presence in the specific channels where their audience are already going to make decisions, right? Proof, cultural proof, distribution, all three working together over time in a media discipline. And here's the thing that I want to say about that, because, it's really important. None of these leaders, like I said, got there by accident. They got there by being strategic about how they were going to show up. And I don't want you to confuse accessibility with authority, because that's something that burns people out quick too. Mass reach is a distribution strategy, but it is not the only one. And for leaders at a certain level, it's frequently not the right one. So that's something I want you to think about too. And so let's do an exercise. So I call it a proof map, and it has 4 columns. So you could pause this, get your pen and paper, and come back. Column 1 is proof type. And so in that, you're going to put your client results, your leadership proof, your cultural proof, your intellectual property, your frameworks, your book, your podcast, your newsletter if you have one, your methodology. Column 2, you're going to put what I have. Be very specific. Not great results, but the actual thing. That could be, I have a 94% conversion rate with people that call their practice. That could be it. Something very specific. Or I have a 85% retention rate with employees over a 3-year period. There's a reason why that's happening, right? Column 3, what does it prove? Does it prove your competence, your leadership, your relevance, your originality? You need to be very precise about that. And then column number 4, where should it travel? which channels, which conferences, which rooms, which papers, which media, outlets, which audiences. Fill that in and then sit with the fourth column because that is where most leaders have done the least amount of thinking or they've outsourced the thinking. And there's nothing wrong with that if you have a partner who is helping you strategically get that out. And I would actually suggest that, at your level. If you cannot decide where the proof should travel, you don't have a distribution strategy yet. You have proof that's different. Any proof without distribution stays in the room that it happened. And I think that's sometimes, for some people, it's very painful. For some people, they don't care. But it really depends on what your intention is and what you're trying to do. And when the proof of that distribution stays in the room, it doesn't compound. It does not build authority. It just sits there. It's private and it's underused. Narrative equity compounds when the right story, the right proof, the right people, and the right distribution begin enforcing each other. And it's not all at once. It's not overnight. It's over time with intention and with architecture. And this is what this series has really been all about. Four ingredients: origin story, consistent output, demonstrated results, cultural proof. And the multiplier that makes it all travel is distribution. And the leaders that get this right, again, they're not the most talented. They are clearer. They're more visible. They're more trusted, not everywhere. They're unmistakable in the rooms that they choose to show up for, depending on what their intentions are. And that goes back to what I always say: be intentional or be irrelevant. And those are the ingredients. And so at Diamond Hands Media, we've helped serious builders in medical aesthetics own their authority since 2020 through brand strategy, leadership media, and advisory that operates at the leadership level. We build the architecture.